So one of the online vendors that I often go to take a look and see, whether I find some comics that are worth my while to buy is HipComic. Now, HipComic has recently been sending me an email every month that gives me the top 5 comic books sold on their site by means of dollars. So the top dollar sales there. So I started thinking about that. And, it's nice to see what's number 5 through number 1, but were they really good sales for the purchaser? In other words, were they booms for them or were they busts where the seller got the good deal? Let's take a look at the 5 and see whether they are booms or busts or both. Stay tuned for the video. Anachronic. Hi, comic book fans. I'm Joe, and welcome to Anachronic Comics. So as I mentioned, I have been getting emails every month from HipComics giving me the information about their top sales, the top dollar sales on their site. And so they give you the top 5. And as I mentioned, I'm saying to myself, well, that's kind of cool. You sold this for X dollars, but was it a good sale or not? And I generally don't take a look at it. But I think from the standpoint of a collector, although there might be some curious sense as to what the top sale is, for me, it really tells me whether or not maybe from HipComics, or if you do it for any other online seller, whether the sellers are getting the better deal of it and whether the buyers are perhaps spending too much money. So I thought we'd take a look at the 5, see if it is kind of a fun thing to do. And if so, let me know in the comments and I'll do it again next month. All right, so let's get started. So number 5 on the list is Vault of Horror number 35 from 1954. So let's take a look at the HipComic page, sales page here. And as we can see, you've got Vault of Horror number 35 from 1954, listed as fine condition, but with a moisture stain. And it looks like the moisture stain might be in the top left-hand corner. There were 27 bids on this one, and the final sale was $1,336. So that's a healthy amount for a golden age, end of golden age. I think we can consider this end of golden age horror comic from EC. So now let's go. We're going to be using, I think, cover price for most of these because cover price will give us the raw comic book value. So let's take a look at that and see what it says. So if we take a look at it, we see it shows us that the issue number 35 actually came out in February 10th of 1954. All right. And the last recorded sales value was $1,061. It was a CGC 3.0. And the current trend seems to be up for it. All right. So the most common raw is very good, or a between 3.0 and a 4.5. But here he's saying it's fine. So that's more in their line, but between a 5.0 and a 6.5. And here it says that the fair market value, along with the last sale, was $1,560. So here it would seem on its face that if in fact that comic book is fine, that the buyer may have gotten a good price on it. And with the moisture stain and not being able to see the book really up front, you don't really know whether or not that grade is a good grade that's given to it. One thing I can tell you is that the sale was by Infinity Comics. And I've bought quite a few books from Infinity Comics, and I find them to be really quite accurate in terms of their grading. So at least in this particular instance, I would give them the benefit of the doubt and say that their fine grade for this particular issue of Vault of Horror is probably spot on. So here, for $1,336, it seems that the buyer beat out 26 other bidders or 26 other bids and got a pretty good deal. All right, so that's number 5 on the list, Vault of Horror number 35 from 1954. Okay, next on the list, number 4 is Giant Size X-Men number 1 from 1975. Let's take a look at the Hip Comics listing. All right, so you see here, Giant Size X-Men number 1, 1975. Very good to fine condition. First appearance of the new X-Men. The winning bid was $1,480 for this raw comic. And there were 61 total bids. So quite a few people, or at least quite a few bids on it. And again, if you take a look at this was Infinity Comics. Again, from my standpoint, a reliable seller and one that you really can rely upon for a good grade evaluation of the books that they are selling. Okay, so now let's take a look and see what cover price tells us about Giant Size X-Men number 1. Okay, so here we've got a Giant Size X-Men number 1, issue number 1, Marvel, February 25th, 1975. Again, raw comic books that we're looking for. This was a key, first appearance of Colossus, Nightcrawler, Storm, and Thunderbird. So looking at it, we see that the last recorded sale was a CGC 8.5 for $3,499 just a few days ago. All right. The most recent or most common raw is very good, 3.0 to 4.5 at $1,293. Right. So if we go back down and take a look at the particular values for a very good to fine, you see that's anywhere between $1,293 and $1,500 is what we're talking about. Since he said very good to fine, I think that I would probably rely more on the $1,293. Although the last sale, again, earlier this month was $1,500. So it could very well be that there might be an upswing in this. All right. So how well did our buyer do? If we take a look and we use $1,250 as the amount that's there, then we can see that this particular individual, by going back to the Hip Comics listing, selling it buying it at $1,400. If it's closer to fine, did a pretty good job. So very good to fine would seem to be somewhere between $1,300 and $1,565. So I think this really falls within the range. So we think that basically from that standpoint, that the buyer, got a decent deal. He got a deal that was spot on as to the grade and the fair market value. Okay, so number 3 on the list is one that I'm quite interested in because I do have this comic book in raw form. However, let's bring up the Hip Comic listing. And you'll see here that this Fantastic Four number 3 from 1962 is being sold as a CGC 5.0. And the final bid, after 63 bids, and the winning bid was $2,081.19. Now, this is a significant book. It is a key. All right, so let's take a look and see what cover price has for it. So here, cover price shows that it came out on December 12th of 1961. And remember, here we're talking about a 5.0. So let's go down and see what the values are. So the last sale was a raw sale. The most common slab is 3.5, a little bit lower for $9.88. All right. So that's the most common sale. And mine probably is in that neighborhood, I'd say. Well, let's take a look now at the slabbed comic sales. You can see if you have a really high-end one, 9.4, 9.6, you could be talking about a nice amount of money. But let's get it down to the 5.0, which is the one that we have here. And you see 5.0, the fair market value is $1,920. And that's the most recent sale as well. So at $2,081, it would appear that the buyer was in the ballpark, but paid a little bit more than perhaps he needed to or she needed to in this particular situation. However, let me say this. If it was a book you really wanted and a book that you felt you needed, maybe even for a collection, paying a little bit more than fair market value is always fine and a good thing. Again, it's up to you as the buyer. to make that determination. Okay, so the comic book that was the second most expensive comic book sold on HipComics last month is Incredible Hulk number 181. All right, let's take a look at the HipComic listing. So here you see, first thing you're going to see is that it is one of the old slabs. It's one of the old slabs. All right, so let's read it. The Incredible Hulk number 181 from 1974. It's a CGC 5.5, but because it's an old one, it's got small cracks on the sides and bottom of the slab. So this one might need to be reslabbed, which might be an issue to maintain the 5.5. Now, we don't really know whether or not this book has been pressed, cleaned, or what have you. So I guess that's something to be considered. You might be able to get a bump up too, based on the condition of the book right now. But let's take it at its face, a 5.5. There were 53 bids, and the winning bid was $2,252. All right. So let's take a look and see what cover price tells us about this particular book. And we see right away that issue 181, again, first full appearance of Wolverine. That's a first full appearance. It came out in July of that year. And a CGC 8.5 most recently sold for $5,755. Current trend is upwards. The most common slab is a 7.5 for $4,175. So let's take a look at the 5.5 as we go down the list. You can see the higher grades can command a nice amount of money. The 5.5 here is listed as $2,780 as an FMV, but a most recent sale did $2,500, so a little bit of a downward trend. So here, our buyer spent $2,252 for a 5.5, so it looks on its face like it was a good deal. Now again, maybe you can even put it up to a 6, assuming that the book itself could be upgraded before it being sent for a reslab. But just on its face, good deal. Looks like you could turn it around for a few $100s more. Okay, so the number one most expensive comic book sold on HipComic last month was X-Men number 1. So let's bring up the X-Men number 1 listing. And we can see this X-Men number 1, right away you can see it's a restored grade 5.0. It's the first appearance of the X-Men, all right? The restoration, if you take a look at the listing at the top, indicates that it included color touch, pieces added, tear seals, and it was reinforced. So it's listed as an extensive restoration, not minimal, extensive. And that might turn off some people, but not not enough people, because here there were 82 bids, and the winning bid ended up being $4,061 for a 5.0 restored. So the first thing I'd like to do is to take a look at the cover price for just the just the basic non-restored version. And you can see here, HipComic, first appearance of X-Men, and so forth, and Magneto. And the most common grade is 4.5. Highest known value is a 9.6 for almost $872,000. But let's take a look here at the 5.0, again, without restorations. And a 5.0 without restorations runs for $11,167. But one of the things that I like Go Collect for is that it does break down the slabbed sales based upon whether it's restored, whether it has signatures, and so forth. So taking a look at Go Collect, you can see here that there were all grades 6,452, Universal's 4,792, and Restored actually has 772 books on their census. Let's take a closer look at this book because of the restoration that's involved. You can see that, it's had better days. We're looking for the restorations here. Color touch is probably in the reds somewhere, but it's hard to tell just from here and taking a look at it through the lens. The edges, they look as worn as a comic book from way back then would be. Again, restoration likely is difficult to see here, and color touch, I don't know if you can see any of it. We're looking here at the back now. Well, I can't make it out, though I'm looking at the spine now to see where it might have been reinforced. The reinforcement likely was inside, but you can, up there you see some, potentially some kind of paper inclusion there. You can see the difference in the color that's there. Again, some here in that corner as well. So you can see that there was some restoration here, at least on the back page, right? The front, a little different. I really couldn't see much there. So it presents as well as it can for a book from 1963. Okay, so now back on Go Collect, let's take a look at the restored grades for this book. All right. And if you look down at restored grade, you see there was one at 9.4 for $4,080. That was a 9.4. A 9.2 restored, $11,000. It looks like they're going up, but those are a little bit, some of them were pretty old. So that 9.4 was 2003. The 9.2 at 11,000 was 2018. And the 9.0 at 16.8 was 2021. But let's make our way down to the 5.0 and see what we've got here. So according to Go Collect, a 5.0 has a fair market value of $5,040. And they took that from the last sale, which was in 2023. So here, our purchaser paid $4,061 for 5.0 restored. And we take a look, we see that a 5.5 sold in 2021 for $14,000, and a 4.5 sold in 2024 for $6,800. So at $4,061, it looks like maybe our purchaser here got a good deal. So there you have it, the top 5 sales on HipComic for September of 2024. How did our buyers do? I think they did pretty well. I think that they generally got good value. Again, for raw comics, you're going to have to rely on the seller's evaluation of the comic book's condition. And so just be careful and make sure you know the seller and have confidence in him. For graded comic books, a little bit different. You've got the grade there. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you're interested in seeing my X-Men collection, which started with number 2, not number 1, you can click right here. Be well, guys, and I'll see you soon.